Mr. Tim Foody, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good, Joey. How are you?
Tim, I'm doing fantastic, I think. I want to know this before we really get to anything too important, and that is there a conversation, an argument, possibly a discussion that you found yourself on the wrong side of history of at some point in your life and you just ultimately
Ooh,
regret it now?
wow. That's a tough one. This is hopefully not a well, maybe it's controversial, but not going to get me in any real hot water. One of the things that I like about being in the office is that we have a lot of these debates where you can argue both sides pretty vehemently. Debates like, is a hot dog a sandwich? Is chili considered soup? And if it is, what's your definition? That makes cereal not a soup. I don't think I've been on the wrong side of those, though. I think I usually can bring folks over to my camp, but it's funny. Those are the hot topics that we get to enjoy in the office on break times.
I think the answers to all of those is no, but I could just have offended a lot of people. Personally, for me, Tim, there was a point in my life where I thought physical keyboards on phones needed to be a thing, and I'm embarrassed by it because that clearly um, did not need to be a thing.
I was ready to die on that hill with my BlackBerry Bold.
Yeah.
It was to this day still my favorite phone. I didn't trust that everything could be a touchscreen, but you're right. I was definitely on the wrong side of that one too.
Yeah, it's just you think about the foolishness and how we've grown and how we've educated ourselves since then. Well, so
That's
I
right.
think I think the thing that I wanted to talk about, and as it relates to insurance, and I guess this topic in general, is how many people do you think are currently on the wrong side of like just where cyber threats and security and coverage are just as it relates to their business? Because I think we're sort of in a similar parallel where it's slowly coming, but I think there's still a lot of people that haven't quite really realized what's out there.
Yeah, that's a good point. We're definitely heading in the right direction, and the last year or two have accelerated that. But I don't think we're close. I would argue most folks are probably, if we flip a coin, we might be close. Maybe half the population out there sort of recognizes where they are and where they need to be. And our conversations every day are, we know this is what you had in the past, and we know that nothing has really changed with your operation, but unfortunately, the world at large and the environment in the market has changed dramatically. So we're having to adapt to that. But I would venture a guess we're right around the halfway point now. A year ago, we were probably not even a quarter of the way there, but it's evolved pretty quickly.
What and I guess what has the urgency level been? Getting maybe to the halfway point, and what conversations are you hearing from agents in terms of the conversations that they want to have with their clients that maybe are starting to come up? Like, just what are the things that are starting this, and how is it going for everybody?
It's a really difficult transitional time right now, and every renewal is feeling some pain. And I think that's because what we're seeing in the insurance space is not only additional requirements to be able to get the insurance in the first place, and your insurance is becoming more expensive, but also you've got to spend more money to make yourself attractive to insurers. So it's a difficult kind of double whammy versus the previous 10 or 20 years in this market where we had to have insurance companies fighting for us or fighting to make themselves attractive to us. Now it's kind of the other way around. So things are on their head a little bit, but for the broker side, what's really become evident and what wasn't there, I think, for a few years, is what emphasis there is on just being here as an educational resource as much as anything else.
Going to that education piece, there is a lot of, like you said, sort of moving targets as it relates to understanding cyber. A lot has changed in the last year in terms of just like what a company has to do to even be willing to sort of be looked at for coverage these
Right.
days. What is that number? I guess what sits number one for you in terms of the things that agents need to know when they're going in to have these conversations when insureds are reaching out, and because it is something that I think people are at least talking about. It depends on how serious they are, but what is that thing that sits at top of you that everybody needs to know?
Not to get overly technical with it, but from a control standpoint, we say, and we've been saying for 8 or 10 months now, it's MFA or the highway. If you don't have multi-factor authentication on your systems, you probably aren't going to get insurance. And that's a tough message because 2 years ago, you were getting a pat on the back for having that control in place. Now it's the bare minimum. That's the important thing, I think, for insureds to understand. for our retail partners, really what I can preach best is just get in front of things early and often. We can help have the conversations with their insureds. We can help decide what might need to happen or what would be nice but isn't absolutely necessary. But having those conversations a week before the renewal are a little tougher when versus having them 3 months before the renewal.
Do you have any sort of real life examples of conversations going through that MFA process? Because I think sometimes people maybe make it to be a bigger deal than maybe it necessarily is. Like, granted, like I think once it's actually in place, and there might be more issues with the people like dealing with it on the day to day than it is, but the actual just implementation of it, is it something that maybe people make into a bigger problem?
Absolutely. I mean, with most email providers, it's the flip of a switch. If you don't have it and you're working with either third party RT or IT or you just have Gmail or Outlook, it's a very, very easy thing to implement. What we find is the delay in that is not the cost, because it's really affordable. We're talking $3 to $4 per employee per month. If you buy everybody a cup of coffee every month, you can get your MFA. But the reality is there is a little bit of a learning curve to it. So the IT folks look at it and say, we've got 100 people that might pick up the phone and call us and ask what this is and how to do it. So we don't want to turn that on all at once. We'd like to do it in a phased effort. And again, that's fine if we're starting early enough in advance. But if we need it by tomorrow, we need it by tomorrow.
That's a good point. I guess I didn't really consider that. And the staged approach, I would imagine, saves a lot of. Well, let's ask this question. How many people do you see actually have that preparation in place to where they're able to do that? Or is it a disproportionate amount of people turning it on at the last minute just to be able to get the coverage?
It's a disproportionate amount of people turning it on to qualify for coverage. But again, that number's heading in the right direction. Like most of these things, the education is out there. We're reaching a point now where we're 60 days out now from when the market started to really turn in a real way from a requirement standpoint in June of 2021. So I think that pain, hopefully, knock wood, is going to get a little bit less so as we approach now what'll be the second renewal, where we're talking about things like MFA. There's going to be a next version of it. We know that. We just don't know exactly what it's going to be. You know, it all comes back to early communication and education on our part.
I definitely want to get back to that next thing. Not that we can predict the future, but I think it's worth at least talking about. But really quickly, before we move too off of the MFA thing, is I guess, have you talked to agents who have had success getting in early with that conversation to where a business owner maybe has listened and they're like, hey, listen, that sounds great. Maybe we will get this staggered over the course of 6 months. So by the time we really need it, we're not overloading the systems. We're not overloading our people in terms of just their ability to, like you said, get that help that they need.
100%. You know, the brokers that I work with that I think really do the best job of it is they treat it as a way to have a mid-year touch point with their client. So they're reaching out either 6 months in advance of the renewal, 4 months in advance of the renewal, and saying, "Hey, let's complete the application now." It allows us to have a conversation about things we might want to change or things we need to change, and we can evaluate the cost benefit of that. What it does is two things. It doesn't put the insured under the gun as far as needing things to happen in a short period of time, because keep in mind the IT resources are finite, and those folks are pretty overloaded now too. But the other thing it does is I think it really allows the retail broker to just continue fostering that relationship with their client, showing them that they're being proactive. Most people aren't touching base at the 6 month mark because they don't have to. I think that allows retail brokers to just get a little bit more stickiness with their clients, which is huge.
So I think a lot of that is there could be some resentment to the agencies that have, we'll say, their stuff together to be able to have that 6 month conversation. It's like the person
Yeah.
that's always exercising every day, or having the salad for lunch sort of thing. What stands out to you that separates that type of agency that you see, that is kind of consistently organized with their processes to have that 6 month procedure versus the ones that are not?
Like everybody else, there's just not enough time in the day. And some people are, rightfully so, I can't argue with this, they're just trying to stay above water. They're just trying to do what's right in front of them. If you can set aside an hour or 2 hours to just look at your renewal book and set up calls and say, at the 6 month mark, I'm putting this on my calendar and we're going to have a conversation. If you do that and have that sort of thoughtful, proactive effort, That's where I see a big difference being made, because if you don't, we're all crazy busy. There's a lot of fires going on. We know that there's new business, there's renewal business, there's certificate requests, there's loss runs. There's a whole host of things that you can just drown under unless you're really thoughtful about that proactive process.
Yeah, and I want to get back to the idea of what's sort of next. And like I said, I don't want to make you predict the future, but I mean, if you want to take a shot, Tim, I'm certainly not going to stop you.
Let me
Um,
just grab my crystal ball
yeah,
here.
I mean, feel free. But I guess the question is it does feel like MFA sort of came abruptly in terms of just how it was met with such, ubiquity across the underwriting process. Do you anticipate things to be maybe rolling out a little bit slower? I think maybe now that people have their wits about them, maybe in the market, does it feel like things have normalized to the point where they can install changes at a much maybe more manageable pace? I guess tell me what you're seeing.
The short answer there is it depends, because everyone has such a different control environment. From the insurance company perspective, there's really a sliding scale of the things that they need. We know MFA is a baseline. Pretty much everyone has to have that. It's not really worth much more of a conversation. Beyond that, some of the additional controls that are really hot topics right now, things like endpoint detection and response, things like training your staff, pretty simple things that we can partner with retail agencies on, oftentimes for free to implement. Things like how do we control our backups, all really important. And the way the insurance companies look at it is sort of on a sliding scale. If you're in a certain industry or you're a certain size, those things become of a heightened importance. So that's a long way of saying it depends, but they're looking really, really intensely at email security, backup security, and really what it all boils down to is the underwriters want to see, do you care? Are you making an effort to make yourself have good cyber hygiene? If we think you're doing that, then we'll insure you. If we don't think you have a proactive approach to making sure that you're secure, we've got 100 other submissions on our desk that are maybe willing to do that.
Yeah, this kind of feels a little bit like, somebody that's maybe in their 70s, 80s looking for, a nice, well preferred underwritten life insurance policy at this point. It seems like it feels like it could get to that point. And do you find some businesses do you find agents, talking to businesses that are maybe that stubborn in that case? They're looking for something that essentially doesn't exist anymore or will soon not exist?
We see that. I don't know about every day, but very, very frequently, where the choice is just to not take the coverage at all, whether that's not to renew it or not to buy it in the first place. Because as I referenced, the investment to get yourself to a level of being insurable and then paying for the insurance on top of that is just something that some folks refuse to accept. But I think the nature of where the market is now, it supports the fact that you need it. One of the things that's unique about cyber and the market relative to other coverages is the news does us a lot of favors. It's everywhere. People know that breaches are going on, so we have to explain the why, and we have to explain the how to avoid it. But we're not just babbling about things that insureds don't understand. It's right there in front of them everywhere they go.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this, kind of what we're discussing, predicting the future and stuff, dictates on the market and how fast, because it doesn't seem like any of it is slowing down. If anything, it seems like we haven't even come close to scratching the surface of what's possible in terms of cyber attacks. Again,
Yeah.
this is pure speculation on my part, but how much of that, I mean, from what you've seen from watching just how the the threats have developed over the years, if you sort of had to give your, I guess, guidance statement to agents, like, listen, like, we're only, we're at the, like you said, we're halfway point of acceptance, or at least, kind of that, where are we at in terms of the maturity of the space and the threat levels and things like that?
That's a good question. When we look at what we were doing 10 years ago, nobody was buying it. The security controls didn't matter. Even 5 years ago, if you wrote down your address and your revenue, you can get a quote. And what we saw from 5 years ago until about 2 years ago was just a race to the bottom. Everything was getting super inexpensive. There was tons of new competition in the market. And now we're on a really serious upswing. But things that we talked about a few years ago, if for people that have been selling cyber, we talked a lot about notification costs and how expensive that was going to be, and the obligations to make sure people were aware that their data was accessed or breached. That's not really as important anymore. Now we're talking about ransomware. One of the things that people are speculating is that the regulations are going to change, and maybe ransom payments aren't going to be legal anymore. If that happens, that would obviously change the landscape pretty dramatically. But I'm pretty sure the criminals are just going to find another way to still get into our systems and figure out a way to cause some pain. That's their job, and they're pretty good at it. So even as those regulations continue to change, I think we're maybe halfway through this evolution from both a claims trend standpoint as well as just a security control standpoint. Those things are going to continue to evolve too.
Now, if an agent is sort of in that conversation and maybe they decide to throw their hands up, the client's not biting. They have no interest in MFA or anything. Is there another coverage that you think maybe deserves is a logical pivot, I guess, to at least have some sort of success within that conversation with their clients to maybe provide a little bit more protection across the business?
The only other thing outside of in insurance for cyber is just practicing other good ways of having cyber hygiene. So hiring third-party IT, making sure you have training in force for your employees so they know what to look for if an email looks suspicious. Some kind of simple blocking and tackling, really. When we look at the overall toolkit of what makes you well protected from a cyber event, part of it certainly is insurance, but the other part of it is all those other things. If an insured doesn't want to get to a level of either qualifying or paying for a cyber policy, there's really not another product in insurance that's going to address that. If anything, all other insurance products are making efforts toward not paying cyber claims and ensuring that they don't get brought into cyber claims. So, absent of having an actual insurance product, it would really just be about having more of a proactive security effort internally within your own company.
All right, Tim, I got three more questions for you, sir. The first one is, what's one thing that you hope you never forget?
I have so many things running through my mind right now.
You can just grab one.
Well, I hope I don't forget the names of any people in my family or who they are right off the bat. If I bring it to a work perspective, I hope I don't forget where we started in this whole cycle of the market, because I think it's really, really going to be relevant and important to understand where we're going and how we're going to get there.
Now, on the other side of that, Tim, what is one thing you still have yet to learn?
Oh, well, I don't know what I have yet to learn. You don't know what you don't know, right? I think the important thing is I've been doing this a long time, and certainly long enough to know that there's a lot that I don't know. There's no new product or new company, insurance company, or underwriting meeting that I won't join, just because I think we always have something to learn. And if you look at the people who are really successful in this business, who are much older than you and I, they're still willing to learn too, and recognizing that they don't know it all.
All right, Tim, last question to you, sir. If I were to hand you a magic wand of sorts to reshape, change, alter, speed up really any part of insurance, what's that thing? Where is it going? And what's it doing?
To speed up or change something in insurance. This is a little bit of a double-edged sword, but I'm going to answer with technology, because I think insurance can really, really benefit from technology. I think relative to some other industries, we might be a little bit behind the curve. Insurance, like a lot of things, is heading in the direction of being commoditized. The other edge of that sword with technology is that in some cases it can serve to we think, or we fear, replace brokers. When that happens, people like myself and my colleagues and the retail brokers that we work with, really, we just need to focus on how we can continue to add value in new and different ways. Technology being a thing to be afraid of because it's going to replace us, I just really don't subscribe to that. First of all, if it's going to, it doesn't care about me anyway. So really, it's incumbent upon me to just make sure that I'm continuing to add value in new and different ways. And I think if the last 2 and 3 years in this market has shown us anything, it's that the value of having human involvement and expertise is more impactful than it's ever been.
Tim, this has been fantastic, so I'm going to leave it right there.
Great. Thanks, Joey.